And now joining us does a tremendous job, a new job for him, but he's been covering football in New York for a very long time, now an NFL insider for SNY, and that's Ralph Vacchiano, who joins us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. Ralph, congrats on the new job, and thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Well, as someone that is involved in radio, the best part about my job is I could show up in shorts and a T-shirt, and it doesn't matter what I look like. But now you're on television, and you make that transition from the newspaper to the TV. So I'm sure that you've had more makeup done than ever now, and you also had to get some new clothes, right?
I haven't gotten them yet. I'm getting good use out of the one suit I own, but hopefully I'll have some more soon.
Okay, so Ralph Vacchiano joins us. So let's get to the biggest story with the Giants right now, and that's the kicker, Josh Brown. The league came down and said that it's going to be a one-game suspension. Usually, though, with the new policy, it's 6 for a first-time offender. What did the league find in the mitigating circumstance that didn't make this more than a one-game suspension?
Well, that's a really good question because the league does not explain its suspensions very often unless they're very high profile, and they didn't explain this one at all. At first it seemed obvious at first that he only got one game because it was a minor incident. He was only accused of grabbing his wife's wrist, which is unacceptable, but, it's not exactly Ray Rice or Greg Hardy behavior. But, all of a sudden we all get our hands on the police reports and we see that there may be other circumstances there. He's been accused of being very violent towards his wife in the past, and he called it a moment in time with this domestic violence incident. It turned out that the cops were at his house on 2 consecutive days. He's accused of threatening his son, kicking his wife in the past, on and on. I don't really know. My only guess of why the NFL might have come down so seemingly leniently is they may not have had a lot of evidence. My understanding is that his wife did not want to cooperate with the NFL, or his ex-wife didn't, and if there's not a lot of other evidence, accusations aren't enough to get a suspension.
His wife claims, and we all know it, over 20 cases of incidents like this. And also, with what's happened in the past with the NFL, Roger Goodell made a major mistake in initially handling Ray Rice. I don't buy that he didn't see that video, especially of the NFL power in Vegas. Only one game here. It makes you wonder, has the NFL learned anything? Has Roger Goodell learned anything since the handling of the Ray Rice case?
Well, you certainly hope so, and there's been times, the Greg Hardy case came down after Ray Rice, and he was very harsh with him. He was harder on Adrian Peterson. The big difference here, what Greg Hardy did, it was much more violent than the one incident that Josh Brown is being suspended for. Yes, he does seem to have a history. He's being accused of having a history. But again, the NFL might not have proof of that, and I think the big thing with Ray Rice, what got Roger Goodell in hot water was when the video came out and everybody saw it, all of a sudden the outrage level of the public went way, way up. Obviously we have no idea what smoking gun may be lurking with Josh Brown, whether there's a videotape or an audio tape or whatever, but I do think Roger Goodell learned a lesson, and my only guess here is they just didn't have enough evidence to be harder on Brown than he was.
No question, especially with the video in the Ray Rice case. The minute we saw that, especially how our society operates, sometimes people read things and they aren't irate about it, but when they saw what happened on video, that's when you heard the national outcry. And you hear a lot of this outcry in this case. Just looking on Twitter today, many people think it's a joke that he only got one game. Can you see the NFL, because of this public outcry, maybe go back and change the suspension like they did in the Ray Rice case?
I could never rule that out. They are sometimes slaves to public opinion, and it's very important to them, protecting the reputation of the league. But from what I'm told, they had all of this that we have now, the police report, the interview that the detectives did with the ex-wife, the 911 calls. They had all that information. They did an investigation. They believe they know everything that's going to come out on this. So unless there's something else lurking around the corner that we don't know about, unless there's something Josh Brown lied to them about, I don't think they're going to revisit this suspension. But, I've learned with all of these suspensions over the years, you never know what's going to happen next, and you're never really sure what the NFL is going to try to do.
It just isn't a good look for the league. That's my opinion on it, because when I sit here and evaluate it, and I know the NFL doesn't do everything thinking about the morals of human beings, but they suspend guys many more games for smoking pot in the National Football League, and also you saw what happened with Brady and deflating the footballs. This just looks awful for the league when people could compare, hey, you have a guy smokes pot, only gets 4 games, but a guy hits his wife, and you only give him 1 game.
Yeah, it does look bad. The drug suspensions are a whole different animal because those were collectively bargained with the union. They were set. It's very consistent. A first violation gets this, a second violation gets this. They know the plan, and it's just different from the personal conduct suspension punishment. The big issue with the personal conduct policy to me is the inconsistency just in that policy. And, let's just forget about the past of Josh Brown that we now know, those accusations. The one instance they're talking about that got him suspended was when he grabbed his wife's wrist. That got the same suspension as Sheldon Richardson of the Jets got for driving 143 miles an hour with a loaded gun and a child in his car. There seems to be a big difference. Ray Rice clocked his wife in an elevator, initially got 2 games. So Roger Goodell's biggest problem to me is he's never been consistent with this. And when you can go back and say, hey, how come this guy got this many games, but this guy only got this many games, it just always makes for a PR mess for the league.
Ralph Vacchiano joins us, does a tremendous job as an NFL insider for SNY up in New York. Ralph, why'd the Giants bring him back? They can give him a 2-year deal.
Well, the simple reason is he's the most accurate kicker they've ever had. And even at 37 years old, he may not have the leg he once had, but he doesn't miss field goals. They feel like they are a team that can be in playoff contention, and you don't want to mess around sometimes with a new kicker. For a minimal expense for them, 2 years and $4 million. I think it's $1.5 million this year. There was no reason not to spend that. They obviously knew this was going to come out at some point. They, for whatever reason, they feel comfortable with their investigation into his past. What they read on the police report, they seem okay with. For talent in sports, teams can put up with a lot, and they either decided that their tolerance level was high because they needed a kicker, or when they looked into it, they felt like maybe they didn't have enough evidence, or maybe this wasn't as big a deal as a lot of other people thought.
But with that being said, when you saw Josh Brown speak, I guess it was either today or yesterday, it didn't seem like he showed any remorse. He wasn't happy for the suspension. I only saw a brief clip of that, so correct me if I'm wrong. But with every reaction that you're seeing now around the National Football League, can you see a situation where the Giants maybe say, hey, even though we just re-signed him, it's time to cut ties with this guy and get rid of him?
Well, I agree with you that Josh Brown was not remorseful. He never said, I'm sorry. He never apologized to the team, the organization, his ex-wife, or anything. He was calm and polite and matter of fact, but his words were a bit defiant. He does not agree with the suspension. He called this whole thing a moment. He didn't call it an incident. He didn't call it an attack. He didn't call it an accident or, any other word somebody might have used. He said it was just a moment. And I think that's what got him in a little hot water, because once everybody did a little digging, it was clearly more than just a moment. As for the Giants, again, once public opinion starts to turn a little bit, I can't rule out anything. I don't get the sense that they're looking to get rid of him now, but if the heat stays on, if more comes out, domestic violence is rightfully so such a hot-button issue and a toxic issue for teams. Yeah, I think if this stays in the media and stays on the mind of fans and anything else is uncovered, I could see them deciding, maybe we don't want you after all.
I did see what Ben McAdoo said yesterday, quote, I do support Josh as a man, a father, and a player. How about your reaction to what Ben McAdoo had to say yesterday?
Well, typical coach, he's supporting his player. I don't, on the surface, don't really have a problem with it. I do wonder a little how much Ben McAdoo was briefed on this whole thing. I don't know that he would have been as strong in his support as a man, as a father, as a husband, and all the rest of the things he said if he knew what was about to come out, if he knew those police reports were about to be leaked. It obviously is very bad optics, but I don't think Ben McAdoo did anything wrong here. I really think he was just being a football coach trying to protect his player.
You've been doing this a long time, and sometimes when people have to say things and have that immediate reaction, sometimes they go a little bit too far, like with the whole man, a father, and a player. I'm just wondering, in your time doing this, have you ever had a coach say something and then circle back to it and say, hey, I probably shouldn't have went that far in my defense, maybe off the record or even on the record to you?
Oh, yeah. I'd have to think a little closely about the, define specifics.
Okay.
But there's definitely been times where a coach has said something and then, in hindsight, I shouldn't have said it that way. And sometimes off the record, sometimes on the record, I've seen them apologize. You can get caught up in a moment. Hey, you just saw this with the Yankees, Joe Girardi, something as simple as saying Alex Rodriguez could play all of his last 5 games and then deciding that, that wasn't the best idea. Coaches do that all the time. They're human. And I think that, Ben McAdoo just in this case had the intent of, all right, I got to stand by my player. He's my player. We've decided this. I've got to back him up. And, when he said it, all those things did not seem absurd or unusual or anything until that police report came out. And I bet after that he thought, I bet for a moment somewhere he might have thought, you know what, I probably should have toned this down a bit.
What have been your impressions so far with McAdoo on his time as the head coach of the Giants?
Well, it's hard to get a real good read on him yet. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good coach. The players tell me that he's got command of the room. I'm basing him on dealing with Tom Coughlin in press conferences. He does have a different demeanor. Tom was the general. He gave off this aura of, I am in charge, I am the General Pat here, and everybody else will follow me. I don't get that sense from Ben McAdoo. I think he's more of he comes off like a professor. Like he's got a plan. He's not really going to divulge it, but he's kind of thinking a little bit more than he wants. He wants to show you what he's got and what he's done rather than come up with sayings and big brash press conferences and things. But I think the players like him, and that seems to be the most important thing to me.
Wrapping up with Ralph Vacchiano, who joins us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. Victor Cruz, I'm not optimistic. I know he's very optimistic, and he hasn't played since Week 6 of 2014, and I was at that game that he unfortunately got injured. Do you think he's going to play tomorrow? And also, really, what can we expect from a guy that's been out of the game for so long?
Well, he is on the trip to Buffalo, but since he hasn't practiced, I would be stunned if they threw him out on the field. It would actually, to me, seem very irresponsible if they did that, given his injury history. I don't know. I think that next week is going to be really big for him because, the starters, the key guys rarely play in the last preseason game, and that's not just to rest him. It's also because with most teams playing a lot of third and fourth stringers who are fighting to take, to get the roster spot at the end of the bench, you don't want starters out there so some kid fighting to make the NFL can make a name for himself by taking a shot at your guy. So Victor Cruz, I think, to be safe that he's on the opening day roster, is going to have to play next week in the Giants-Jets game. That's a big one for him, which makes him getting back to practice on Monday very, very key. What can we expect of him? I think the best you can hope for at this point is that he's healthy enough to play in a handful of games and, can be somewhat the player he was, maybe just a productive third receiver. I don't know that you can trust that his body can hold up at this point or that he's ever going to be the same. I hope he proves us wrong. He's a good guy, but after 2 years out of football and 3 injuries now, I don't know how you can have faith that that will happen.
You got me thinking because I know you brought up Joe Girardi a little bit earlier, and you saw what happened with the downfall from Alex Rodriguez retiring and having him being a special advisor next year, and we'll see if that happens. Let's say if Victor isn't able to go for the start of the season, suffers another injury, can you possibly see a scenario where the Giants say, hey, let's try to do that approach that what the Yankees tried with A-Rod when it comes to Victor Cruz?
No, I don't think so. I think the A-Rod thing had a lot to do with the fact that he was owed a ton of money,
yep.
And he was a lightning rod of controversy there. With Victor Cruz, he took a big pay cut in the offseason, in part to help the Giants in just this situation, so they wouldn't be thinking about the financial situation. They cut him while they would save a couple of $1 million in cash, it would actually cost them a little bit more in salary cap room, so it doesn't make a lot of financial sense to do that. I would think the most likely scenario, if he's not physically able to go, he'll land on injured reserve. You can designate guys to come off of injured reserve midway through the season. He might get that designation to give him another shot to come back, but I don't think there'll be any ushering him off into the sunset of his career until after this season. That's when I think he'd be in danger of being released.
I got two more for you. So everyone gets caught up in the sexy names, the Odell Beckhams of the world, the Eli Mannings, and also Victor Cruz, because that's what gets people points in fantasy. But I think what's going to make the Giants either the favorites to win this NFC East or a team that's going to be on the outside looking in come January is that right side of the offensive line. How have they looked so far, and what do you expect from them tomorrow night?
Well, in the opener, the offensive line didn't look great. Some of that was the right side. It wasn't all of them. It's almost certainly going to be the guys you see there now. Marshall Newhouse at right tackle, John Cherry at right guard. My thought on them is the upside is average. At best, that's what you're going to get. It's not going to be a great side of the line. I think overall the line's going to be improved because it's the same five guys from last year, and every offensive lineman I've ever dealt with in my career has told me that the most important thing for building a line is consistency and continuity. So they have that. They have adequate players on one side. They have guys with a lot of potential on the other, and I think it'll be better. The big thing to me, though, is they better hold up on those starters because they are dangerously thin at offensive line, and those backups were absolutely terrible in the first preseason game. We're going to have to see a lot more out of them because right now it looks to me like one injury to the offensive line and everything could fall apart.
Other than the offensive line, and final one before we let Ralph Vacchiano run, and you have such a bright football mind, and I want you to take us through that bright football mind of yours. What are some other things that you just look at and want to see and be impressed with the Giants tomorrow night?
I want to see, I think, first of all, I want to see that offensive line show something when the starters are in there, mostly in the running game. I think the running game is going to be so key for the Giants. I'm hoping that they are going to go away from the four running back rotation that didn't work last year. They're going to say they're going to make Rashad Jennings the workhorse back. But they've got a lot of versatility there. They just need to make sure there's some holes for them. So that line is definitely key. I've still got some questions about the secondary. They've got a lot of good players back there. Guys like Vernon Jenkins, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. They drafted Eli Apple, who probably won't play tomorrow night with a knee injury. And they got a couple of young safeties, Landon Collins and Darian Thompson, a third-round pick this year. I want to watch them pretty closely. I don't know how much the Bills are going to be throwing a lot, but last year that secondary they had couldn't stop anybody. This year they're going to have to help in a pass rush, but I want to make sure those guys can cover. So the offensive line and the secondary, two keys to the Giants this year that I'm going to be watching closely tomorrow.
Ralph, we appreciate the time. Best of luck on the new gig. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.